In this video, we will be talking about ListBox. ListBox is another control that you can add to your application, and it is used to display items back to the user. So in some sense, it works the same as a label. However, ListBoxes are more versatile than labels because you can do different manipulations on the items inside the ListBox. In this video, all I'm going to do is I'm going to create an application to show the difference between a label and a ListBox. To save on time, I created the application already. I will talk about it a little bit and feel free to pause the video at any point. So in this application, we have a label and it is called LBL output. We have 4 buttons. The first button is called LBL display, and the button name is called BTN label display. The second button, the text is called, or we change the text to label read. The name is BTN label read. The third button, the text is listbox display. The name is BTN listbox display. The last button is called listbox read, and the name is called BTN listbox read. For the sake of us saving some time, I created part of the code. However, we're going to finish it together at this part. So in the first 2 buttons in BTN display, in BTN label display, I'm just going to display information back to the user. So in the define part, I'm not reading any information, so I'm not going to define any variables. In the assign part, since I'm not reading anything from the user, I'm not assigning anything, there's no calculation. The only thing that's going to happen is I'm just going to display a name back to the user. And I'm going to do the same thing in a list box. So if I run the application and I click label display, it's going to show that name to the user. So now we're going to add a list box. To add a list box, just like any other control, you go to the common controls, you scroll down, and you will find the option, the control list box. Like other controls, you can either double click or just drag and drop. Once you add it to your application, you can adjust the size. And what I'm going to do is I'm also going to change the name property. So I go to the property window, I scroll up. For list boxes, the naming convention is start with LST, and I'm going to call it output. You notice how the name of the list box is also displayed. At runtime, this will not appear to the user. This is just appears to you in the coding side. So now that we added a list box, let's try to add the output. So in labels, we would put the name of the label.text equal the message or the name that we want to send to the user. In list boxes, you have to put the name of the list box. In this case, it's list output dot items, then add between parentheses, double quotation, and now you can add the message that you want to display to the user. In this case, I'm just going to display the same name. The first part is going to be displayed in the label. The second part is going to be displayed inside the list box. So when I click LBL display, I'm going to see the name displayed in the label. If I clicked list box display, the name is going to be displayed in the list box. And this is the first difference between the label and the list box. When I click list box again, it's going to display the name to the already existing list. In this case, I already have the name displayed for the first time, but the more I click onto the button, the more it's going to start adding that name to the items that I have. This is not going to happen in labels. So every time you send the output to the user, it's going to remove the previous input and put the new message to the user. Let's try another thing. So what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to try to display different names at the same time to the user. So I'm going to have lbl output dot text, and I'm going to display the name James. Then I want also to display the name Jane. I'm going to do the same thing for the list box. Again, if you want to put any display in the list box, you put lst output dot items dot add, then the output. In this case, I'm going to go with the same names, James, and the last name is going to be Jane. So now when I run my application, when I click LBL display, I will only see Jane. The reason behind that is the compiler is going to run line by line. So actually it will display at some point, it will display Uday, then it will display James, but the final display is going to be Jane. So James will replace Uday, Jane will replace Jane. In list boxes, it will add all of them. So it's going to add each one of them in a different line inside the list box. Another property of list boxes is you can actually add items before runtime. And to do that, you click on the list box, you go to the property window, and now you're looking for a property called items. You click on this button, and now you can add items to the list box. When you click OK, they're going to be added to the list box. So now, when you run the application, you notice how I already have the same list. And if I click list display box, it's going to add the names that I have added from the code. Now, let's try to read information from the user, then add them to the label or the list box. First of all, before I do that, I want to clear all the names in the list box. To do that, again, you click on the list box, you go to properties, you scroll down to items, you click, then you can delete the names. So you click on the item and you click delete key. Click OK. Now all the names are removed. So now I want to read information from the user, and I want to use, notice that I don't have a text box, so I want to use an input box. This is how we add the name using an input box. If you have any questions about that, I highly recommend that you see the previous video that I created called input box. So I defined str name. Since I'm reading a name, I'm going to send an input box to the user. It's going to display the message, please enter a name. Then I'm going to display that name to the user. So let's try to test that. So I'm going to enter James. When you click OK, it's going to display that in the label. So now I want to do the same thing, but now I want to use this button, and I want to display the output in the list box. So the same thing, I defined str name to assign str name equals the same thing, cstr. I want to make sure that I am converting to the right data type, input box, and please enter a name. There's no calculation. The output, I'm going to use the same output. So the name of the list box dot items dot add lst output dot items dot add, and now this is going to be the name I'm going to display to the user. So I add that value of that variable inside the parentheses. So now let's try to test our application. So read names, and enter James. Okay, add the name James. Read list box, add Nancy, and edit the name to the list box. I'm going to create another video where we're going to talk about more options that we can use the list box for, and how can we actually manipulate some of the items that we have inside the list box, and what are the different options that we can do to manipulate these items.